Hello and welcome to the channel. This is Sam trying to spin to win on Zwift. If you're new, I hope I'll sweat and suffer enough today to earn your subscription. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you. It is great to see you again. So today we're doing stage 1 of the Pinarello powered race series on Zwift, taking place over 2 laps of the rolling Highlands course. Last I checked, there were over 90 people signed up for the category B, so it should be a competitive race. As usual in my videos, I'll quickly have a look at the competition. We'll then look at the course to see where the interesting points are. And as usual, I've added chapter descriptions so you can skip to the various bits that you're interested in. However, as usual, I'll also shorten the video, not to show the full race, but just what I think are the important bits. So, with that said, let's see how we get on. The first thing I normally look at are the power numbers from the sign up section on Zwiftpower. Please note that unless you look right before the race starts, you will likely not see all riders, as many sign up last minute. So the data may be somewhat incomplete, but it still gives useful information. I have mentioned this in other videos, but I no longer pay much attention to rider rank on Zwiftpower. I have found this to be misleading in the past, and that is especially true right now with people coming back to Zwift after not racing over the summer period. The first chart I look at is the 20-minute power, sorted by the strongest first. For this race, we can see there are a number of very strong riders with 20-minute watts per kilo figures of 4.3 or 4.4. This is bordering on category A status, it must be said. I find myself in 19th place here, and as mentioned, there are likely a few additional riders late to joining the race, also ahead of me. So I can tell right off the bat, this is going to be a very competitive race. The next thing I look at is the 15-second power figures. It gives you a good indication on how you may perform if it comes down to a sprint, and as we know, most Zwift races do. Depending on the race, I pay more or less attention to the 15-second power numbers. For shorter races, like the one today, it is very important. But for longer races, especially with a lot of climbing involved, I'll find it not as relevant. Looking at this race, I am placed 13th, so a little higher than my 20-minute power. As such, if it gets to a sprint, I should be able to hold my own, although looking at some of the competitors, being able to drop 14 plus watts per kilo may be a bit of an issue. Heck, I can't do 1200 watts period, and Snowy Pruitt can do that for 15 seconds. Leg day in the gym for me, clearly. One additional source I look at is rider rank from the Zwiftpower racing app. I have found this to be a very good predictor of how strong riders are. However, while you can look at the post-race results quite easily, I'm not sure how you do it ahead of the race. The only way I know is to look for each rider individually, but with a race of over 100 riders, that is a lot of work, and I didn't do it for this race. For smaller races, such as club ladder races, I do find it extremely useful. Now we have reviewed the competitors and come to the conclusion that this is going to be a very tough race. Let's have a look at today's course. We are doing 2 laps around the rolling Highlands course today. It is, as you can see, a bumpy parkour, but there are no prolonged climbs. Rather, it is up and down the whole way with a couple of 30 to 60 second efforts and a bit of a drag in the middle of the course. I really like this course, and it usually makes for interesting, if hard races. For me, I normally like sustained efforts over say 5 minutes, and I can struggle with repeat shorter intense efforts, which is required on this course. But again, I still really like it. The main selection point is the Breakaway Brae climb at the end of the lap. Now, Due to the lead-in for today's race, we will actually go over that climb 3 times. And this is where I expect a selection will be made each time we go up the Brae. The last time likely being a sprint to the finish line. And who doesn't love an uphill finish, eh? While the Breakaway Brae is the major feature of the course, almost every bump can be a place where attacks can happen, and you really need to be on your toes the whole time. In summary, a fun course with one major selection point, but enough of additional features that you can't fall asleep or you will likely get caught out. Now, let's see how I get on at the start of the race. So, quick correction to my earlier statement. There's now over 130 people signed up for Category B, so this is going to be one spicy affair. It's time for me to get some music going, and let's get ready to rumble. Let's see how we do. As is usual in Zwift races, especially one with a lot of riders like the one today, this one had a very fast start. I drop around 400 watts for the first 30 seconds or so, and then around 300 watts for the next minute before the pace slows slightly. I will fast forward to that point so you can see how strung out the race became just in the first 90 seconds or so. While it is hard for me to tell exactly, but looking at the map in the top right hand corner, we have already dropped quite a few riders at this point. This is normal for Zwift races, especially with large fields, and as such, the initial selection has occurred. After this, the race settled down somewhat as we spent the next couple of kilometers going down a slight descent. I was still doing 3 to 3.5 watts per kilo, so it was not an absolute cruise, but it was calm compared to the rest of the race. So we will skip ahead to the start of the first descent of the Breakaway Brae and rejoin the action there. The first time up the Brae wasn't too bad for me. While I put out relatively high watts, I was able to do so in a measured way. I also used my feather power-up, which helped. I pushed a bit towards the end of the climb to make sure I was towards the front of the group as we crested, as sometimes people like to attack at the top and I wanted to be ready for that. I will fast forward so you can see the rest of the climb, and then we will skip to the next important part of the race. The first serious breakaway attempt happens after about 9 minutes of racing. Prior to this, we had just started climbing up the drag that makes up the middle part of the course and had been doing around 4 watts per kilo. At this point, Francesco starts pushing away and he quickly establishes a lead of a few seconds. Nobody else seemed to respond, and I wasn't going to either as I felt it was too early in the race. But while nobody panicked, it did feel like the pace crept up just a bit. We have now skipped forward a few minutes, and I am about to make my first big mistake of the race. We can see that Francesco is still in the lead with about a 7-second gap to the peloton. I'm in a good rhythm here, trying to stay towards the front of the peloton. Then we see Mr. Bang Madsen make a significant attack as he shoots through the peloton. Now you can almost see the wheels turning in my head as I assess the situation. And, like an idiot, I decide to take up the chase. In hindsight, this was a stupid move and I burned a lot of energy, but at the time I was thinking 2 things. First, I've raced Mr. Bang Madsen before and I know he's a very strong rider. Second, I thought that if I was able to catch up with him and ultimately Francesco, we could potentially work together and stay away from the peloton. So as we watch me sprinting to catch up, I come to the realization that I'm being an idiot. First, I can't even close the gap, which is a bit of a problem for my master plan. Second, with 50 to 60 guys in the peloton, the chances that 2 or 3 riders can stay away for another 15 kilometers or so is very, very remote. So as my senses finally come back to me, I sit up and start drafting again on the 2 riders that had caught me up, and we worked together for a while. But as Mr. Chris Horner says on his YouTube channel, that was a knucklehead move. Over the next couple of kilometers, the peloton does catch me up, and I try to draft as much as I can. The 2 riders up front are still away, and they have around a 6 to 7 second gap as we approach the small Corkscrew climb. As you will see from the footage, we have almost caught them up at the top of the climb, as we did around 7 to 8 watts per kilo, which is a decent effort. Now, if I hadn't gone ahead with my earlier attack, perhaps I could have managed this one a bit better, as I was really starting to feel the effort at this point. We will now skip forward to the next ascent of the Breakaway Brae. I was ready to go all out on this climb, as I really didn't want to lose the front group at this point. But this turned out to be perhaps the easiest time up the Brae in the race. Either people were tired, or were trying to conserve energy as much as possible, but the result was the pace was relatively steady up the climb. I still decided to use my feather to again make sure I didn't lose the front part of the group. I will fast forward to the rest of the climb so you can see how I got on. We have now skipped forward quite a bit, and there's only around 4.5 kilometers left of the race. Not too much had happened since the last time up the Breakaway Brae, and while the pace had been high, it had been steady. As we go up the last bit of the drag in the middle of the course, I make the second big mistake of the race. 2 riders attack, and again, like an idiot, I follow. Looking back at the footage, it's actually the same 2 riders, Francesco and Mr. Bang Madsen, who attacked, but I didn't realize that at the time. I burn another match here, and in hindsight I should have just stayed in the peloton. Again, the chances that they are able to stay away, even though there's only 4 kilometers left at this point, is small. And if they're that strong, well, then they deserve to win. So, more energy burned, and I am now quite tired, with the most important effort of the day about to come up in a few minutes. Sam wins the Knucklehead prize again. We now skip to the last climb up the Breakaway Brae. The peloton has reformed and pushed quite hard over the last climb up the Corkscrew, so I'm already close to the limit as we approach the Brae, but at least I'm still in the front group. The start of the climb is not too bad, although I'm slowly starting to lose the front. I hit my power up, then just tried to put out high watts without starting my final sprint. I make a final push with about 150 meters to go, but I'm really fatigued at this point, so it's less of a sprint and more of a whimper, I'm afraid. This is where those matches I burned earlier, doing my knucklehead moves, would have come in real handy. Now, how much of a difference they would have made, I don't know, as I don't think I could have stayed with the very front of the group regardless, but perhaps I could have gained a few more places. But we'll never know. As we watch me almost fall off the bike at the end, we can see that I finished in 12th place. Considering the mistakes I made, and the level of competition I was up against, and the fact I was already fatigued from riding some 9 hours over the last couple of days, I have to be happy with that effort. It feels like my fitness is finally coming back, and hopefully I can kick on from here. Now let's have a look at the results on Zwiftpower. On Zwiftpower, I finished in 11th place, almost 5 seconds behind the winner, Mikhail. A couple of things to point out here. First, while my 20-minute power figure of 4 watts per kilo wasn't the highest, it was one of the higher ones. In fact, I broke my 20-minute power record with 315 watts, which is good. However, normally I have one of the lower 20-minute power figures in races, which indicates that I worked harder than I needed to during this particular race. And that goes hand in hand with some of the knucklehead tactics that I used. Second, there were some very strong riders in this race. If we look at the winner, Mikhail, he dropped over 13 watts per kilo to win the final uphill sprint. Now, I know he's a heavier rider at 88 kilos, but that is almost 1200 watts for 15 seconds. That's some serious power. Third, I usually look at how I place among the 50s and over. For this race, I came in third behind Luigi, who finished 4th overall, and John, who finished 9th overall. And John is in the 60 and over category, which is very impressive indeed. Okay, time to wrap this video up. Now that I finally managed to drag myself off the floor. That was a tough one. And as I've mentioned, I made some serious mistakes in that race, but you live and learn. Again, if you managed to watch this far, thank you very much. Please like and subscribe, and do leave a comment in the section below if you have any thoughts on the video. I'm very new to YouTube, so any suggestions you may have, more than welcome. Thank you very much again, and I'll see you in the next one.